So there are many debates and a lot of confusion around the sources of power and the power itself. When do sources actually come together in a manner that they create power, political power, as we have been discussing? And today I'm going to build up a little bit on the work of Professor Norman Uphoff, his 1989 paper called Distinguishing Power, Authority, and Legitimacy, taking Max Weber at his word by using resource exchange analysis. So essentially, think about a car, a vehicle, as a system, and that system cannot exist or cannot function without any form of energy, without any form of fuel, whether it is powered through solar cells or it is powered through petroleum or gas. It needs some sort of a fuel to function. So think of systems as the systems that exist in the world, and that energy in terms of the power that makes the system run. Now, there are obviously ways to think about it, and there are debates that these systems are energy structured in a different manner themselves, or energies are systems structured in a different manner itself. But for now, think about it as just the vehicle as the system and the fuel as the energy or power. Now, if you actually think about it, there are three types of powers. So Norman Uphoff has talked about at least six types of powers. I will tell you, and then I will tell you that how I build upon that theory, and I filter it down to three types of powers and apply a little bit of systems analysis to it that gives us other forms of power. So Norman Uphoff talks about economic resources as one type of power, social status as another type of power, information as another type of power, legitimacy, force, and authority as different types of power. So economic resources, social status, information, legitimacy, force, and authority. Now, if you really look at it, you can almost map different types of inequalities along these six different types of powers. So, social status differentials could create, inequalities around racial lines, social lines. Information inequality could lead to, inequalities in educational attainment. Legitimacy related inequalities could create issues such as gender inequalities, etc., etc. So you got income inequalities by a deficit of economic resources. So all of these forms of power can also be mapped to various inequalities. Now, coming back to our original metaphor, the system and the power. Now, my contention over here is that there are essentially three forms of power: economic resources, information, and force. Uh, Now, these three forms of power, they manifest into wealth from economic resources, knowledge from information, and strength from force. I'm going to break this down a little. Let us look at just information and knowledge first. So, in systems thinking, my two professors over here, Professors Derek and Laura Cabrera, who are experts on systems thinking, they talk about what is knowledge. And they say that knowledge is information and thinking together. Okay, and they have a whole definition about what thinking is, which we'll get into in later videos. But think of it in this manner: the way that I write it is that knowledge is equal to information multiplied by thinking, because information, just pure data, will not manifest itself as knowledge unless that data is structured in a manner, unless you are looking at that data from a particular perspective and you're connecting that, different data points to create some meaning and information out of it, meaning and knowledge out of it. So information, when you structure it in a particular manner, that creates knowledge. Okay, so that is the structure that we are looking at for all of these things. Nope. In terms of knowledge, in terms of how information becomes knowledge, this example is a good one. think of a researcher, think of a social science researcher, let's say an anthropologist who wants to understand how a particular tribe lives or how a particular social group lives. Now, the information about that particular social group resides within the members of that social group. Okay, so if the anthropologist is living with a tribe, those information packets reside in the minds of the members of that tribal community. But what is this PhD researcher or this anthropologist doing is structuring all of those data points, structuring all of that information to create it into this thing that we call knowledge, and that knowledge manifests itself as power. So that knowledge is accumulated really by structuring information. Similarly, if you look at economic resources, you know, uh, who holds economic resources really? It is either in inanimate objects like land, but how do we know that this land is somebody's? You need other people's, the society's consent to be able to prove that this land is indeed yours, because otherwise they are inanimate objects. But think of it in terms of where does economic power really come from besides inanimate objects? It comes from people. So think about workers working in a factory. They are the holders of economic power over there, and consumers are the holders of economic power. But what does an entrepreneur do? The entrepreneur structures all of that, little packets of economic power to generate wealth. So the entrepreneur is really creating structures where people come together and agree on certain rules to work in a factory, or use various modes of production to create something of value. And through the structuring, and the structuring also works on the other way. Entrepreneurs create platforms or create spaces where consumers can get access to some of these products of value. So entrepreneur, what she or he is really doing is creating that structure, and as a result the entrepreneur generates wealth. So economic resource multiplied by structure creates wealth over here. And similarly in force, think about a politician. What does a politician really do? Does an individual politician have power? No, power resides amongst the people who are supporting this politician. In democracies, through a voting mechanism where each individual's vote is that little packet of power. But what does the entrepreneur do? A political entrepreneur, if you may. What does a politician do? The politician literally just structures all of that existing packets of power into things that can generate power, or into this political force that can manifest itself as strength. Now, what is the structuring process? So I'm going to jump ahead a little and get into systems thinking over here. Just four things, really. They are represented by this acronym called DSRP: distinctions, systems, relationships, and perspectives. We'll dive deeper into that. But if you really see, all of these are following this pattern. So what does a politician do with the electorate? It would create distinctions between various groups. So it would literally create imagined communities or groups, some supporting certain causes, others supporting certain other causes. Those distinctions are really made focal by a political entrepreneur. The politician also creates various systems. So political parties, systems have a part-whole structure. So various groups that could be part of various other groups, and those could be part of various other groups. And then the politician creates relationships. So these groups are interrelated with each other under certain set of rules, and there are certain norms of all of these parts interacting with each other. So how does one committee in the party interact with another committee? How does the party interact with the society at large? How do legislative bodies interact with each other or with the bureaucracy and judicial system. All of this is essentially creating relationships between systems. And then it is also about perspectives, that the politician gives various perspectives. You change the perspectives, the distinctions change, the part whole structures change, and the relationships between them change. And by doing that, by using this DSRP as four tools, you're able to structure these various packets of power into actual power as we know it. And similarly, you could see that the entrepreneur, in an economic sense, creates a structure and uses DSRP, creates distinctions in products and services, in how the markets will function, or how a particular company would look like, and how various departments would look like. So creates those distinctions within the company, within the markets. Also creates various systems. So part whole structures. A company eventually is a part whole structure. It's a system which is related. All of these parts are related to each other, and that is how the system performs. And there is a relationship between the company and the consumers at large. And the entrepreneur not only does it within the company, but with the society at large as well, creates a niche of their customers. That's a distinction. Creates systems within customers. So there could be the more loyal customers, there could be the larger new acquisitions, uh, and creates various distinctions through brands as well, where people start identifying themselves with a particular brand. Those are perspective giving and distinction making at the end. So the DSRP process, if you really look into it, is also created by the entrepreneur, the economic entrepreneur. And also, if you look at it, that's exactly what a researcher or a PhD person is doing. That the information packets that are available, the person is putting it into perspective, creating certain distinctions. So this concept or this definition of a particular phenomena, that definition is that this is this and not that, and that is a distinction line in itself. So creates distinctions, organizes all of this knowledge into part whole structures, tells you how are these various parts related. So all of this is also done by the knowledge creator. Now, if you look at all of these things, I'm now coming back to Norman Uphoff. First thing that we understand is that there are three sources of power: uh, information, force, and pure money, or economic resource. And through these three sources, when you structure them, you create knowledge through information. Structure information and you get knowledge, structure force and you get political power or strength, and structure money and you get wealth. Okay. Now, all of these powers give you certain distinct types of capabilities as well. So knowledge gives you the capability to make decisions, to draw conclusions, make inferences. Strength or political power gives you the capability to you know constrain resources, or damage, or to provide certain political rights and resources to others. And wealth uh, gives you the ability to consume products and services, or you know, uh, to provide other resources. All of these actually can provide all of the other resources. Knowledge can create political power can create wealth, and vice versa. All of these, they can morph into each other. So these capabilities that you derive from all of these, once they are proven, so if somebody has proven that they have the capability to make decisions, to draw inferences, they acquire they acquire some sort of a stickiness. So every time you don't need to then exercise your power, because just the mere signaling of power is good enough. So once you have knowledge, just the ability to signal can create influence. Once you have political strength, every time you need not exercise that political strength, that can just the signaling can create allegiance and support. And every time you have wealth, every time you don't have to exercise wealth, just the mere signaling of wealth can create prestige. And there's a societal outcome of this. The societal outcome is that influence, the reputation of knowledge can create authority. Okay, the reputation for political power or physical force can create legitimacy and status. In fact, legitimacy is a deep concept which we'll talk about. It's not only tied to political power. In fact, all of these concepts now that we are talking about, they eventually tie into all forms of power. So initially, all forms of power could look distinct, but eventually their applications become a lot more fluid. So, you can then also acquire status, the societal outcome for having monetary power, having wealth. Okay, so those are societal outcomes that are created just by signaling. You don't need to exercise a lot of those powers. uh, After you've proven that you have the capacity to exercise those power once, you don't need to again and again exercise that. So that's a very effective way of uh, exercising power, that you don't really need to expend that power resource a lot of times. Just signaling can create certain reputations. And there are benefits of that. The benefits of having a reputation for knowledge is that your decisions get more easily accepted. So, you get some legitimacy around that. The benefit of having, that sort of a political power is that you acquire cooperation from networks of people much more easily. And uh, the benefit of having economic power is that through that signaling you can eventually define what is worthy, what is valuable. So you can define the market in many ways, and all of these combined is what we call power. So essentially, just to wrap up over here, there are three sources of power, so three energy types. And then those energy types, when they interact with a particular system, when you structure that energy in a particular manner through creating distinctions, building systems, creating relationships, and bringing in perspectives, you create knowledge, strength, and wealth. And once you acquire those and you have proven capability to exercise those, you develop some legitimacy. And those legitimacy, once it is established, it becomes sticky in itself. It's not easy to erode. And uh, once it has been established in itself, you don't need to exercise your power all the time. There are cost effective ways of just signaling and gaining easier acceptance to your ideas, or getting easier acceptance into networks, or developing an ability to influence the markets, and defining what's worthy and what's not. And all of these combined is what we call power. And all of these sources are quite fluid. They can morph into one another, or one form of power can beget another form of power. So that is our discussion for today, and we'll see you next time with another facet of power.